We're going to pick up with chapter 3. The prophecy. We've heard before that hen, we hear it in the first book and once or twice in subsequent books, that Hinwen is an oracular pig, that hen can tell the future. We actually see here how. All right? And I want to pick up with, we actually see the prophecy in the chapter of the letter sticks, which is the chapter we were covering when we last met. And I don't want to talk about the actual incident with the sticks being destroyed, but the interpretation or the reading of the prophecy in the chapter, the prophecy, chapter 3. So page 31. Dalbin says, Hinwen has told us all she can. All I fear that we shall ever learn from her, I've again studied the symbols she pointed out, hoping against hope I misread them. And he says, I asked how Durnwin might be recovered. Here's the answer. Ask sooner, mute stone and voiceless rock to speak. Not a very helpful answer. Such is Hinwen's message as I have read it from the first letter stick, Dalbin says. Whether it's a refusal to speak, prophecy in itself, warning, I don't know. But the symbols of the second letter stick, spell out the fate of Durnwin itself. And here he tells us what that one means. Quenched will be Durnwin's flame, vanished its power. Night turned to noon, and rivers burn with frozen fire, ere Durnwin be regained. Okay? So first, Durnwin's flame is going to be extinguished. Then, before it can be regained, night has to turn to noon, and rivers have to burn with frozen fire. Well, those sound like paradoxes. How can night become noon, and how can rivers burn with frozen fire? So they talk about that a little bit. And he says about the third stick, it was destroyed before Hinwen could complete her message. She might have told us more, but judging from the first two, probably wouldn't have been that positive. Terence says the prophecies mock us. Okay? Fluter, top of 32. In all my travels, I've never noticed even a small creek burning, not to mention a river. Rune. Yeah, but man, it would be an amazing thing to see. Wish it could happen. Gwydion, who had been sitting thoughtfully at the table, turning the splintered rods back and forth in his hands, rose and spoke to the companions. Hinwen's message, prophecy, is disheartening, he says, and far from what I'd hoped. But when prophecies give no help, men must find it of themselves. That is, when we can't rely on the gods, so to speak, when we can't rely on foretellings of the future, what do you have to do?
Take matters into your own hands and make your own destiny. Exactly
right. You have to act. It's how good would it do them to just sit there and think more? Wouldn't do them any good. So he says, as long as life and breath are mine, I will seek Durnwin. That is, here's my action. I'm going after the sword. Prophecy doesn't change my plans, just makes them more urgent. Terence says, let us go with you. Gwydion says, no, I don't think so. The more men that come along on this task, the harder it becomes. Why? Because he's thinking he's going to have to sneak into a Nuven. It's a lot easier to sneak with one than it is with multiples. Terence says, okay. But what if Caw flies ahead? What if Caw could fly ahead and kind of give you some spying intel? Yeah. Gwydion, you have found some wisdom in your wanderings, assistant pig keeper. Your plan is sound. Caw may serve me better than all your swords. But I shall not await him here. To do so would cost me too much time. So he says, send out Caw and have him find me where I am. Terran, at least we can ride with you as far as Smoy's castle. Guard you until you're well on your way. Okay? And Gwydion agrees to that. Says, ride with me to Smoy's stronghold. And page 34 is sent off, page 35, and we're told in the middle of that page, Terran recalled from his boyhood the young Gwythaint whose life he had saved, and he well remembered the bird's sharp claws. Despite Caw's gallant heart and sharp wits, Terran feared for the safety of the crow. Why? Because he knows the crow is fighting literally into the Gwythaint's nest. Okay? So they have their little council and they get ready to go on. Bottom of 37, top of 38, Terran says, in response to Caw says, I know you want to go along with Gwydion, but, Terran, I myself would ride to Anuvan if Gwydion allowed me. What you say is true, old friend. For the boy I was, just, 4 years previously? Maybe a little bit longer than that. Maybe 6 years previously. So he's somewhere between probably 18 and 20. For the boy I was, this would have been a bold adventure full of glory. This much have I learned. A man's life weighs more than glory, and a price paid in blood is a heavy reckoning. What does he mean?
That he means that trying to find glory in battle is not worth the price of dying.
What did Adaon say in the second book? There is more glory to be found in a field well tilled than in a field steeped in blood. Terran, a man's life weighs more than glory. That is, it's worth more than glory. And the price paid in blood is a heavy reckoning. My heart is not easy. Long ago you made your way to Anuvan to rescue Hinwin after she had been stolen. Tell me, Gwydion have any chance? Caw, no man has better. Okay? So they're getting ready to leave, bottom of 38, and Terran and Rune have talked about the seawall that Rune says he needs to build in his harbor. And Rune says, I see now how I've planned it wrong, and here's the way to do it. And he explains. But Rune, Terran sensed, was no longer the feckless princeling he had known on the Isle of Mona. As Rune was absorbed in the task he had planned, so Terran had been caught up in his own labors at forge, loom, and potter's wheel. In other words, Rune wasn't a wanderer. Rune had specific duties, but Rune also grew just as Terran grew. And if Rune had found manhood in ruling a kingdom, Terran had found the same in toiling among the staunch folk of the free commons. He watched Rune with new affection. The king of Mona spoke on, and Terran's interest was drawn to the scratchings on the ground. And Terran kind of corrects him and says, I kind of think here it's not going to work out, but maybe if you do this, I fear your wall may tumble if you build it thus. Why? Because Rune's idea is to build the wall and put smaller stones at the bottom with bigger stones on top like that. Terran says, maybe you should put the bigger stones at the bottom, sink them deeper, lighter stones. Oh, why didn't I think of that? Rune says. So they go on, page 40, or they get ready to, and Terran's thinking of the prophecy about the flame of Dernwind. The flame of Dernwind quenched. Yet how shall Iran achieve this? For all his power, I will not believe he can even draw the blade. Gwydion, prophecy is more than words that shape it. That is, prophecy is more than the words that just contain it. It's the meaning behind the words. Seek the meaning crud I got last week is still not left me. Seek the meaning that underlies it. For us, the flame of Durnwin will be as good as quenched if Iran keeps it from my hands, right? Because the sword won't do any good if it's not in the right person's hands. Its power will indeed vanish, for all it may avail us, should the blade be locked forever in his treasure hoard. So Gwydion, in response to Glue, who hears that word treasure and his ears perk up, Gwydion says that Anuvin is a treasure house as much as a stronghold of evil, long as it has been filled with all the fair and useful things Iran has stolen from Prydain. So, we've already been told, Iran has done what, for example, with the knowledge of farming?
He's stolen it.
He's stolen it. He's stolen all the written knowledge, and he hoards that. And so he's gone throughout all of Prydain and he's stolen everything that was a treasure, and he's just hoarding it. He's not using it anyway. He's just keeping it from others. Okay? Gwydion says, these treasures do not serve him. His purpose is to deprive, to keep their use from men, to sap our strength by denying us, what might yield a richer harvest than any of us here has known. And harvest there doesn't just mean growing. Harvest can mean, a harvest of good deeds, the kind of things that they could do if they had the knowledge that Iran has stolen. He goes on, and Taran says, I've been told the treasure troves of Anuvin hold all that men could wish for. Plows that work of themselves. Magic is what that is. Scythes that reap with no hand to guide them. Magical tools and more. For Iran stole the craft secrets of metalsmiths and potters, the lore of herdsmen and farmers. This knowledge too lies forever locked. So did he really steal plows that plow by themselves? No. He stole the knowledge that goes with plowing and reaping and such. Right? So they go off towards King Smoit's castle. And as they go, notice even Call is coming along for this one. Eilonwy's going with them. And she says, page 42, that she's forgotten half of her embroidery thread. And she needs it if she's going to finish Henwin, that is that embroidery, that big cloth that she's made for Taran. She says, I'm going to need that thread if I'm going to finish Henwin properly. Okay? She says that a few other things too. I don't remember what they are right now, but I'm bound to think of them once I get there. Call. The princess becomes more of a lady in every way. In other words, she went off to learn how to become a lady. She never actually thinks she does, but he says she has become more of a lady. Why? She's thinking of sewing stuff. Okay? Let's see here. I can skip that. So they go off to Smoit's, and I want to pick up with 44. Bottom of 43. Taran sounded his horn, hoping the signal would guide the bard in case Fluter had mistaken the path. Why? Because Rune, Fluter, Eilonwy, and Glue, page 43, are out of sight. That is, they're not with Taran, Gwydion, Call, and Gurgi. The one group is separated into two. Taran sounds the horn, thinking, Rune's gotten them off on some kind of wild goose chase. They don't catch up, so Taran and the others go off to Caer Cadar, page 45. They make their way into the great hall, and they're flanked by guards on either side. Terran, Call, and Gurgi followed. Smoit will be at his meat, Terran says. So they get in there, and what do they see? They don't see Smoit, they see Mag. Terran realizes a trap essentially has been set, and who's been captured?
Terran, Call, Gurgi, and Gwydion.
Okay, the three warriors, really, because Fluter's not really a warrior. Run definitely isn't a warrior. Eilonwy isn't a warrior, so to speak. Okay? So, page 46. They talk with Mag. I mean, it's not a happy-go-lucky kind of, hey, how's it going talk. Mag's got them in his power. And he says, more powerful than Smoiter, the king of Mona, more powerful than Queen Achrin is my liege lord, mightier now than the Prince of Dawn. He says, I serve no lesser liege than the king of Anuvan, Aran, Death Lord himself. Okay? So, now we're going to see Terran, Gwydion, Gurgi, Call, locked up in those fearsome dungeons we've heard so much about from Smoit.
Well, no, he blocked those up. They're actually locked in like a pantry.
Yeah. Others are in the thing. Bottom of 47. Mag goes on and says, Lord Aran has many secret liegemen among the Camp of Kings. Notice what that means. Many secret liegemen. Liegemen today we would just call followers. Okay? Among the Camp of Kings. He has promised them great riches and domains, and they are sworn to serve him. Okay? He says, it was I who came up with the plan to steal the sword. I have wrought this, page 48. I, Mag, second only to the Death Lord. I, Mag, speak in his name. Okay? So what's Mag saying? What is Mag going to get out of all this?
All.
Yeah, he'll be the second most powerful person in Prydain after Aran. Gwydion says, you are as much a fool as a traitor. First, to believe Aran, then to believe that Smoit would heed your serpent's words. Gwydion's afraid Smoit's dead, but he finds out, no, he's just locked up. Okay? Mag wants Gwydion and Terran to speak with Smoit to get him to release his men, essentially, so that they'll work with him. Chapter 5. So Fluter and the others ride on along, and they come up to where they're on a hillside in the woods, and they can look down, and off in the distance they see Caer Cadar, Smoit's fortress. And they look down at it, and they see Smoit's banner flying. Page 55. Eilonwy's kind of ill at ease. She says, how odd. I see King Smoit's jolly old bear, but Gwydion surely must be there by now, and I don't see the banner of the House of Dawn. Queen Teleria taught me it is courtesy for a cantrip noble to fly the golden sunburst of dawn when one of the royal house visits him. In other words, when the prince is there, you fly his flag. In England, you know where the queen is, or better put, you know where the queen is not staying by whether or not the flag is flying. If the queen is in residence in Buckingham Palace, they've got the Union Jack flying from the flagpole. If she's not staying there, the Union Jack isn't flying. If she's up at Balmoral or Holyrood, then it'll be flying there. Okay? Same idea here. This is an aspect of decorum, or as Eilonwy puts it, courtesy. Fluter, yeah, in normal circumstances. But, Gwydion's not going to be one to pay attention to these little protocol items. A formality, as he puts. Eilonwy, yeah, okay. Page 55. Shouldn't have thought of that. How clever of you, Fluter. He goes, it's experience. Long experience. Such wisdom will come to you in time. Even so, they keep riding, getting a little bit closer. It's curious, the gates are closed. Knowing King Smoit, you might suppose they'd be flung wide open. Guard of honor waiting for us with King Smoit himself at their head. No, no, no. Gwydion follows a path of danger. Not around the festivals. I understand how such things are done. I've been on 1,000 secret missions. Or maybe one, because he's afraid his heartstrings about to break. She goes, oh, I'm sure you know much more about things like this. So she's noticed two things that neither Rune nor Fluter notice. Both those things are hints. Okay? Fluter says don't pay any attention to them. Why? Gwydion's not going to, stand by courtesy and protocol. They get a little bit closer. Top of 56. But King Smoit isn't at war with his neighbors, as far as I've heard. 2 watchmen on the walls would be more than enough. Why does he need a whole party of bowmen? So, Gwydion's flag isn't flying. Should be if Gwydion's there. Gate doors aren't open. Should be if Gwydion, Terran, and Call are looking for us to come. If Smoit's not at war, open war with the other Cantref lords, he would probably only have a couple of guards on the wall, and instead there is a whole party of bowmen. Fluter says, well, they are there to protect Gwydion. Eilonwy, but if no one knows Gwydion's there, because his banner isn't flying, why would he need all the bowmen? Great Billy, now you make my head spin. Are you trying to say Gwydion's not at Caer Cadairn? Well, if he's not, we'll soon find out. And if he is, we'll find that out as well. But if he's not, then why not? What could have happened? And if he is, then there's nothing. Oh, yes, there is. I don't understand. And that's Eilonwy's whole point. It's like those cartoon things, What's wrong with this picture? She's looking at it, she's going, something just doesn't look right. I've come all over chills and creeps and I don't like it. You've had experience, Fluter. I don't doubt, but my ancestors were enchantresses. And so should I have been if I hadn't chosen to be a young lady. Rune, if the princess feels there's something amiss, let me ride ahead and I'll find out. I'll rap on the gate. I'll just walk right up to the front door, he says. Fluter, nonsense. I'm sure everything's quite well. Ding! Why does it break?
Because he's not sure.
He's lying. It doesn't break because not everything is well. It breaks because he's sure of just the opposite. He's sure something's wrong. But he says, the girl has put an idea in my head and I can't shake it out. One way everything looks all right, the other way it looks all wrong. Okay? But he says, let me be the one to go find out. Why? Because if anything's wrong, no one will suspect me. No harm done. Why will no one suspect him?
Because he's a wandering bard.
He's a wandering minstrel. I'll come and sing songs for money. Okay? So, he goes on. Hours pass. They don't hear anything back. Now she's worried. She says it is all wrong. Rune, maybe not. Why, he'd have come back immediately to warn us if there was. No doubt Smoit's giving him supper. Okay? If everything was fine, what would Fluter have done?
Either gone out himself or sent somebody.
Yeah, or signal them, wave a flag or, come on. Okay? Fluter makes his way back and he tells them Mag is there. He's got them all trapped and caught. So, Eilonwy, how do we rescue them? Fluter, we can't. Fluter, almost always, at the initial point of some kind of trouble, his response will be failure. Or, we can't do this, or it's impossible, or it's too hard. Okay? We can't. Impossible. Not with only 4 of us, including Glue. Okay? So they keep talking a little bit. Middle of 59, they hear a noise, and suddenly, quick as Leon, Eilonwy leaps upon the humped figure, and it turns out to be Gwistel of the fair folk. So they ask Gwistel why he's there, what he's been listening to, if he knows about Iran being stolen, blah, 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 blah. Okay? And that Taran, Call, Gurgi, and Gwydion are captured. Top of 61, Gwistel. Some days are like that. What's to be done? Nothing. Alas, hope things will brighten. In other words, that's how it goes. Maybe it'll get better tomorrow, but we can't. Okay? So he talks about the huntsmen of Anuvan are gathering. The Cauldron-born have come out, whole troops of them. He says the Cantref lords are rallying their battle hosts. They're getting ready to hold council. Friends are better off where they are, etc., etc. And what do they finally get Gwistel to do? What does he reveal to them?
His like items.
Yeah, he opens up his cloak like he's a guy hawking watches and stuff, and he's got all kinds of essentially like explosives. All these weapons, okay, that they could use. So, chapter 6, a clutch of eggs. Find out these little egg things, throw them, they burst into smoke. And Ilanwi says, what else have you got hidden away? Come on. He says, oh, nothing but a few little personal things of my own, odds and ends. So we have eggs that produce smoke, mushrooms, okay, that do what?
Spitfire.
Okay. They'll singe your hair off. Ilanwi, this is perfect. We can create smoke with the eggs that help create diversion. We can throw the fire at people if need be. What else? Page 67. Packets that have black powdery earth. You put them on your feet. No one can see your tracks. Okay? So they come up with a new plan. Fluter's going to go first. He says they'll open the gates since they know him. He'll has Gwistel's eggs and mushrooms under his cloak, he says, bottom of 67. Once the gates are open, throw the smoke, blast a fire. He says, and we'll run in at top of our voices. Rune, can't fail. Top of the next page. But on the other hand, we'd be rushing into our own smoke and fire. I mean, the warriors couldn't see us, but we couldn't see them either. Now this is Rune who says this. Okay? What's it show us?
Paying attention.
Paying attention. He's learning too. Okay? Ilanwi says, yeah, that's not a good idea. So she says, Rune's right to a degree. We need to come at Caer Cadairn from different angles, different ways. In other words, we don't all just rush in at once. Okay? Rune, okay, so there's 5 of us, top of the next page. Some can climb over the rear wall, others enter at the gate. Then while the others attack from the far wall, he says, I'll ride straight through the gates. 1. Ilanwi, no, you should stay out of the actual fighting unless it's absolutely necessary. That way you'll be on hand when you're needed, but it won't be quite so dangerous for you. Why does she think that?
Because he's a king of Mona if he dies.
Okay, he's king of Mona. If he dies, he's no king. That's one reason. What's another reason? That's the charitable reason.
I mean, he's still he's definitely matured, but he's still kind of, he's ruined.
Yeah, he's ruined, man. I mean, he's still kind of clumsy.
He's
Not
not
the-
good in a fight.
Not the brightest bulb in the box. Yeah, maybe, probably not that good. But Ilanwi says, you're not a prince anymore. You're king of Mona. Your life isn't altogether your own, don't you see? What does she mean?
That he has a duty to live for his people.
And this is an idea that's actually pretty important in medieval literature. Do kings have the right to march off into battle to defend their kingdoms, or is it their responsibility to delegate to others to go do that? The Old English poem Beowulf kind of has as one of its central questions, what is a good king? Is it a king who goes off and conquers on his own, leading his troops? Or is a good king someone who tells his troops what to do and sits and lets them? Because if the king dies, what happens to the kingdom? It can fall apart, okay? Which, if you're familiar with the Old English poem Beowulf, at the end of the poem, that's exactly what happens. She says, you have a whole realm of people to think of. We shan't let you take any more risks than you have to. You'll be in far too much danger as it is. Okay? If Queen Teleria could have guessed the way things would turn out, you wouldn't have sailed to Caer Dallben in the first place. If your mother knew what you were getting up to, young man, is kind of what she's saying. Okay? But who technically calls the shots now at Mona?
Oh, him.
Yeah. He's the king. She's the queen mother, so to speak. She doesn't call the shots. Eilonwy, your father understood what it means to be king. You must learn as well as he did. Okay? His father didn't get to march off and do things. Rune says, Terran of Caer Dallben saved my life on Mona. I am in his debt, and it is a debt I alone can repay. He's talking about something Eilonwy's not. He's talking about honor. He's saying, I owe Terran. You owe another kind of debt to the fisher folk of Mona, she says. Theirs is the greater claim. She doesn't say, no, you don't. You don't owe Terran anything. She says, yes, you do owe him. But you owe a greater debt to your own people. You have to live for them. Rune turned away and sat dejectedly on a hummock, his sword trailing at his side. Why? He acknowledges she's right. Okay. So, they talk about the plan, bottom page 70. Fluter, remember the plan, must go exactly as we said. When we're all in position, Gwistel is to pop open one of those famous mushrooms of his. The Shire fire should draw the guards to the rear of the courtyard. That will be your signal, he says to Eilonwy and Rune. Then, and not before, mind you, be ready to force the gates open as soon as possible, for I imagine we shall be rather in a hurry to get out. Same time, I'll free Smoit's men locked up in the guard room. They'll help you if you need them. So, Fluter and Gwistel will go over the back. Gwistel will set off his diversion. Fluter will go off and try to rescue Smoit's men, while Eilonwy and Rune merely open the gates from the front. Why? So that Terran, Gwydion, and the others can leave. Okay? So they wait until it's dark, and we get the plot hatched, so to speak. Page 75. Eilonwy runs in. She bursts into the cell, holding her little bauble thingy. We have the smoke and the fire going off. Terran asks, as Mag's warriors fall back, Terran asks, page 76, where is Rune? Fluter, I don't know. He and Eilonwy were to open the gates for us, but great Berlin, what's happened since then, I can't guess. Everything has changed. One of Mag's men trod on glue. We were discovered before we could go another step. From then on, the fat was in the fire. He goes, I don't know where glue is. Okay, they mentioned Gwistel. So, page 77. Now they've nearly reached the stables. Terran sees Gwydion. Okay, he's fighting among warriors. He saw through the shifting clouds the tide of battle was turning against the companions. Only a handful of Smoit's men had been able to rally for an attack. The others were cut off, locked in combat through the courtyard. Terran's thinking Gwydion is going to get hacked down. Gwydion says, to the gates, fly all who can. In other words, we have to retreat. Terran realizes they're outnumbered. Mag has more than enough men to take care of them. And what happens? Suddenly, a mounted figure galloped into the courtyard, Rune astride his dapple gray. King of Mona's boyish face shone with a furious light, and he cries out as his horse rears. You know, he's thinking of the cameras placed for the great shots. Bowmen, follow me, all of you, into the court. Which really doesn't make a lot of sense because you wouldn't want bowmen coming in through that close quarters. But he spun the mare about, beckoned with his sword. His words rang above the clash of arms. Spearmen, this way, make haste. Okay, so he's talked about bowmen and spearmen. Terran, he's brought help. Fluter, help? There isn't any help. So what has Rune done?
He's causing a distraction, fooling the people, thinking there's reinforcements coming.
As Fluter says, a ruse. He's tricked them, because what do Mag's men do? They all fall back. It will never work. Terran, but it does. Leon bursts through the gate. She's looking for her. Fluter, he's duped them well for all the good those eggs and mushrooms did us. It was Rune who turned the trick. Okay? And we find out Rune is badly hurt, page 79. Our laundry's down there. Okay? Rune is lying on the ground. Terran says, the day is ours. Without you, it would have gone differently. Don't move when Rune tries to move. Arrow sunk deep in his side. Amazing. I've never been in battle before. I wasn't sure of anything at all. But I say, the oddest things kept running through my head. I was thinking of the seawall. Yes, your plan will work very well. And I think I shall be glad to be home. Fluter had come up with Leon loping at his heels. So there you are, old boy. I told you we'd have more than our share of trouble, but you pulled us out of it. Oh, the bards will sing of you. And we hear Rune is dead. Okay? They bury Rune, and they ride around his mound. Why? It's an Anglo-Saxon custom. Okay? I think Lloyd Alexander just throws it in because it's a nice touch. And we hear, farewell, Rune, son of Rudlum. Your seawall is unfinished, but I promise you your work shall not be left undone. Terran is saying, I will do it. If I live through this, I'll go back and do it for you. Okay? 80, bottom of the page. Gwydion realizes it was a stupid plan from the beginning. I shouldn't have been off seeking Dernwin. No longer will I seek the black sword, whatever strength it may yield him. In my own strength I will stand against him to the death. I ride not to Anum, but to Kirdathel, to rally the sons of Dawn. In other words, we've got to have a big battle. I'm going to give up the sword. Terran, but can't anybody breach the stronghold? He goes, I know what you're thinking, Terran. Here's how you can serve me best. Obey my commands. Okay? He says we can't count on Gwistol and the fair folk to do everything. He says, no, we need to raise an army. Fluter, you go up to your kingdom. You raise the northern army. Okay? To you I entrust the rallying of the northern cantrip, bottom of page 81. You, assistant pigkeeper, your own task is urgent. You are well known to the folk of the free commons. I charge you to raise whatever force you can among them. In other words, Terran is going to become what for Gwydion?
A warlord.
A warlord, a battle leader. Lead all who will follow you to Kirdathel. Gurgi and Kal, son of Kalfur, will ride with you. So too will the princess Eilonwy. In other words, Terran's goal from the first book is now achieved. He will ride as a war leader for Gwydion. They go and they make their way, or before they do, Aiden shows up. In bottom 82, Aiden says, there is no time now to speak of time past. I'll offer you friendship and this. And he unsheathes a rusted sword. It has served once, can serve again. Say where you ride, and I will go with you. I value the sword and value more the man who bears it, Tyrion says. But your place is with your king. You belong with Smoit. Okay? And Eilonwy unfolds her embroidery. And she says, you're a war leader now, but I've never heard of a war leader without a battle flag. This is it. Okay? Ka arrives back, and we see the cauldron born. I'm going to skip a bunch. They go to Tyrion, Call, Gurgi, Eilonwy, go off to Medwyn's Valley, 88 and 89. Caw has been there, and when they all arrive, Medwyn says, you would be, yes, the family like this is unmistakable. He's talking to Caw here. You would be Caw, son of Codweir, etc., etc. Page 89, keeps talking to him, the bird, says, yes, I've heard about the assistant pig keeper, can't remember his name, I remember the horse, etc. And he tells Caw, serve him faithfully, son of Codweir, for his heart is good. Among all the race of men, he was of the few I allowed within my valley. Okay? So what else does he do? He then calls together, what kind of animals? Wolves and bears.
So all the predatory animals?
Meat eaters, essentially, yes. Bottom of 89. And he says, it has come. I should have so guessed, for I sense a strange fear among the animals. More and more find their way here, fleeing what they themselves only dimly know. They tell of huntsmen abroad in force and armed men. Now I understand the meaning of these tidings. The day I'd ever feared has come upon us, yet my valley cannot hold all who would seek refuge. What does he mean, the day I'd feared? It's the apocalypse. I mean, this is the big battle. The race of men faced the slavery of Anuvan. So too the creatures of Predain. Why? Because Iran doesn't want there to be any free creatures. Everything will be enslaved by him. In the shadow of the land of the dead, the nightingale's song will choke and die, Medwyn says. Galleries of badgers and moles will become prison houses, etc., etc. So what does he do? He tells the Lord of the Eagles, fly swiftly to the mountain areas of your kindred, bid them rise up in all their strength and all their numbers. You, Brinac and Briavale, the wolves, spread the alarm among your brethren, among the bears, with paws to smite and arms to crush, among the sharp-antlered stags and all forest dwellers. He now rises to his full height, says, speak to them in my name and tell them, such are the words of one who built a ship when the dark waters flooded Predain. Noah says, against this flood of evil, each nest, each lair must be a stronghold. In other words, let every creature do what?
Fight against Iran.
Fight against Iran. So what does that mean if the creature comes up against somebody who's not for Iran?
To leave them alone.
Is it just to leave them alone?
Or to help them.
It's to help them. It's the enemy of my enemy is my friend. This kind of mentality. Right? So, they make their way off. Tyrion and the others make their way off. And the first place they come to is Kinarth, where he meets up with Hevid the Smith. And Hevid says, page 92, a good greeting to you, wanderer. We saw you afar and gathered to welcome you. So notice, they see Tyrion and a few people making their way towards them, and the free men of this comet gather. Tyrion says, good greeting to you. I bring a stern task, tells him what he's there for. The folk of the free comets honor King Math, this is Heaven speaking, and the House of Dawn, but they will answer only to one they know as a friend. and follow him not in obligation but in friendship. And so let heaven be the first to follow Terran Wanderer. Okay? So notice what they've said, or what heaven says. They honor Math and the House of Dawn, that is Prince Gwydion. But we'll only go to war for someone we know, not some distant lord. And heaven says, you I know. I will follow. Let heaven be the first to follow Terran Wanderer. And all the men say, all follow. Why?
Because they're all random.
How do the others know Terran? The other men of this comet?
He's lived among them when he was with the smith.
Yeah, he's lived among them when he was working with heaven. The implication is he's been with them, drunk beer with them, eaten with them, etc. Okay? Heaven gave Terran and the companions a hard grin. Our will is strong, our weapons lack. He goes, no matter. You toiled bravely in my smithy, now shall my smithy toil for you. He says, and I'll send word to every metalsmith in the comet lands to labor as hard for you as I myself will do. Each day, what happens? People from the neighboring comets show up. Herdsmen, farmers, who needed no urging to march in the growing host following the banner of the white pig. Okay? When he'd accomplished all he could at Kinarth, heaven rejoined Terran to serve as his master armorer. Terran says, you've done your work well, but we still go too lightly armed. That is, we need more. I fear all the forges in Prydain will not be enough to serve our need. Somehow I must find a way. That is, Terran says, all the smiths can't make enough swords and spears. And a voice says, I've got an idea. And there rides in Hlanio. Remember Hlanio? The guy who built weirs, nets essentially, over rivers that don't have fish. The guy who builds a pasture, who fences in a pasture for sheep that he doesn't own. The guy who finds stuff and turns it all to good use. Okay? Terran says, but what about your family? Your wife, your children? You got to have 6 kids at least. He goes, yep, another one on the way. But if there's ever, Lanio says, page 94, if there is ever to be safety in Prydain, I must follow the Wanderer now. And he says, hear me. I have seen pitchforks and hay rakes among the comet folk. Could not the tines be cut off and set in wooden wooden shafts? Well, you take a long spike from a pitchfork and you attach it to a long shaft, and what do you have?
A spear.
Essentially a spear, something that can do a whole lot more damage than a spear. Because if it's long and slender, you can multiple times, and a lot easier than a spear, because the spearhead can get stuck. Could not the tines be cut off and set in wooden shafts? Thus would you gain 3, 4, and even more weapons, where you had only one to begin with. Terran, or heaven goes, yeah, how did I not see that myself? Because when heaven builds weapons, what's he making? Weapons. He doesn't look at a farm implement as something that can be repurposed. Terran, Lanio sees more sharply than any of us, calls luck what others would call keen wits. He says, go, friend Lanio, find what you can. So what else do you think he's going to find? You take pruning shears. You take them apart. You put a bigger handle on. You got another spear. You take the hooks off of heavy rakes. Put that on a long handle. You swing that, that'll take pieces of head right off, you know. Page 95. They go on to Comet Gwyneth. And Terran meets with Dwivik the Weaver. She says, I know you seek warriors, not crowns, but tarry a moment, give a greeting to one who has not forgotten you. He goes in, and Dwivik says, in response to Eilonwy, because the ancient weaver woman sees Eilonwy and says, Terran Wanderer I know well enough, and who you may be I can guess well enough, even though you go in the guise of a man and your hair could stand a little washing. Indeed, I was sure when the Wanderer and I first met that he had a pretty maiden in his thoughts. I'm not sure if he did then, and even less sure if he does now. If you are not, then no one else can be. That is, if you don't know, then time will tell which of us is right. But meanwhile, when she unfolds a cloak and puts it around Eilonwy's shoulders, take this as a gift from a crone to a maiden, and know there is not so much difference between the two. For even a tottering grandam keeps a portion of girlish heart, and the youngest maiden a thread of old woman's wisdom. Now, old woman's wisdom is a theme that runs through a lot of fantasy literature. That if only the people would listen to the old women. Okay? Terran says to Drivik, Heaven and the Comet Smiths labor to make arms for us, but we need warmth as well as weapons. We have no garments like this. Do you think a weaver woman less hardy than a metalsmith? As you wove patiently at my loom, she says, now my loom will weave the more quickly for you. And in every comet, shuttles will fly for the sake of Terran Wanderer. Again, we've heard before, all the comets will do what? Produce weapons for Terran Wanderer, not for Gwydion, not for not for King Math, not for Prydain, for Terran. Okay? We hear somebody else ride up, and it's Lasser. He says, I feared you would deem our comet too small and pass it by. He says, it was I who led our folk to find you. Word has spread throughout the comet, so now people are seeking out Terran. Why? Especially why Lasser? More so than the people of Comet Gwyneth or the one that Heaven was from. Well, Terran's already led them in battle. Against Doreth and his company, Terran, the size of Issof is no measure of its courage, and I need and welcome all of you. But where's your father? He asks Lasser. Where is Drudwas? He's dead. Winter took him from us. I grieve for him, but honor his memory by doing what he himself would have done. What of your mother? Because how old is Lasser?
A few years younger than Terran.
Yeah, 14, 15, maybe 16. He says, others will tend my flock. My mother knows what a child must do and what a man must do. I am a man and have been one since you and I stood against Doreth and his ruffians. In other words, I had to grow up quick. Bottom of 97. Terran asks, what about Doreth? He has not troubled us since that night, nor will he likely trouble us again. I've heard he's left the Comet lands and rows westward. He has put a sword in the service of the Death Lord, it is said. Maybe. But if Doreth serves anyone, it is himself. Terran, your service, what? Freely given, counts more for us than any the Lord of Anuvan could hire. Terran Wanderer, when he first leaves Caer Dallben, where does he go? To Smoits. Well, almost first, after Aiden's. What problem does he solve for Smoit?
What to do with the two, rival...
With Gast and Gorion. Smoit just wants to throw him in prison. Okay? Until they kind of come around and serve him. Terran says, the king will only truly have loyal followers if their allegiance is freely given. Okay? Notice what he just said. Your service freely given. He's not saying I'm like a king, because I don't think he's aware of his words. But he is saying, you are swearing loyalty or fealty to me like I am a king. He's saying, I ride like a king because of your service freely given. Prince Gwydion will be grateful to you. Why does he bring up Gwydion?
Because he believes him to be the highest
Okay.
of authority.
Why else? Terran is doing nothing. Nothing. Man, I'm tired. Terran is doing nothing of his own accord. He's doing nothing for his own desires. He's doing all of this, why? To raise an army for Gwydion. Okay? He will take all of his troops to Gwydion and essentially lay his sword in Gwydion's lap and say, here's your army, Lord. Okay? That's what it means to be a war leader. Lesser. To you, rather. In other words, we're not swearing allegiance to Gwydion. Our pride is not in fighting, but in farming. In the work of our hands, not our blades. Never have we sought war. We come now to the banner of the white pig. Why? Because it is the banner of our friend, Terran Wanderer. He's saying, we're not born swordsmen, but you're our friend. We will fight for you. Gwydion? We don't know Gwydion. Okay? And it's kind of interesting. He refers to Terran as friend. I don't know that Alexander knew this, but I think he probably did. In Old English, one of the words used for friend, in fact, it's the dominant word used for friend, is wena. It's not wine, wena, which means friend. It's also used probably as frequently as the word king for king. Only there, it usually has something else in front of it, like goldwena, gold friend. And what's meant by that is the one who distributes gold. The king. King distributes gold for going off and fighting in his battles. Okay? I think Alexander is doing this intentionally, so that when he says, we come now to the banner of the white pig, because it is the banner of our friend, I think he's suggesting this older English idea as well. That the friend is also one's king. Okay? Bottom of that page. Terran's talking with Call, and we're told, Terran was grateful for Call's wisdom, gladly sought his counsel. It was Call who gave him the thought, as the marshalling camps grew crowded, to send smaller, swifter bands directly to Cair Dathel, rather than march from one comet to the next with a force becoming ever more cumbersome. That is, rather than gathering 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, Terran is sending groups of 25, 30, 40, 50 off to Cair Dathel to reinforce, to build up Gwydion's army. So he's not having to provide food, lodging, etc., so he doesn't have to stretch out supply lines and all that kind of stuff as he moves from one comet to another, building up the army he's raising. Lasser, Heaven, and Elhanio would not leave Terran's vanguard. In other words, they've become like Terran's personal bodyguard. Okay? And stayed ever close at hand. But when Terran wrapped himself in a cloak, stretched out on the frozen ground for rare moments of sleep, it's Call who stood watch over him. Terran is in effect becoming a king. Okay? You are the oaken staff I lean on, Terran says. More than that, you are the whole sturdy tree and a true warrior. Call. You want to honor me? Say rather, I am a true grower of turnips and a gatherer of apples. What? Why does Call say that? Why not take pleasure in being called a warrior?
Because he holds higher honor in growing food than fighting.
No warrior whatever, save that I am needed thus for a while. See, the difference in Call's mind between being a warrior and a farmer is that a warrior has one purpose. It's to go to war. It's to fight. It ultimately is to kill. A farmer has more purposes because a farmer can become temporarily a warrior. I'll refer to Old English again. In Anglo-Saxon times, from roughly 500 to roughly 1100, beginning of the Middle English period, kings did not have standing armies. When England was invaded by the Normans in 1066, Harold Godwinson, the King of England at the time, had no standing army. And there were actually two invasions that year. One was in September, one was in October. The first one occurred in the northern part of England, about, I don't remember the distance, about 80 miles or so north of London. And Harold Godwinson had to raise an army to go fight that invading army of Norse invaders, Vikings essentially, okay, led by his brother and the King of Norway, okay? So he had to raise an army. Where is he going to raise that army from? Now, he did have what were called his house carls. Those are his personal bodyguard. Think of them as Secret Servicemen, okay? He had them highly trained, very effective, but he then had to raise an army as he marched north. He raised that army from the places he marched north through. Farmers. It's September, okay? In England, it's not like September here, where you're not really having the full harvest going on. September in England, you are in the full throes of harvest season. Most of these guys do not want to leave their fields. Why? You don't bring in the harvest, you go hungry during winter, right? But he has to raise his army. He raises that army to take care of a specific battle. They defeat the Norse. His brother is killed. Those men can then go back to their farms. It's while he's up there, after that battle is won, a messenger reaches him, oh, by the way, William of Normandy has landed on the southern coast near Pevensey. You know what that means? He now has to raise a second army. Because the guys who fought in that first battle, they punched their tickets. They don't have to fight again. So now he has to march 250 miles to a new battle site and raise another army. Okay? Terran's doing the same kind of thing. Call. No warrior, whatever, save that I'm needed thus for a while. My garden longs for me as much as I long for it. I left it unready for winter, and for that I will pay a sorry reckoning at spring planting. In other words, he hasn't, for example, laid down the dead and dying organic material from that fall to rot into the soil to make it fertile for the following spring. And he's saying, it's going to make my planting the next spring all that much harder. Terran, we'll dig and weed together, true grower of turnips and true friend. My heart, too, will be easier when I am once more an assistant pig keeper. No longer seeking glory. No longer seeking honor. For Terran, honor can be found being an assistant pig keeper, digging for turnips, picking apples. Okay? So, Terran, word comes to Terran that Smoit has raised a strong host and is marching north, and he sees Terran, and Smoit says, page 100, well met, you left us a wanderer and returned to us a war leader. No more wandering, right? Does he know his journey? Does he know his destination?
Yep.
Cardathel. Does he know his purpose?
Yep.
As for your skill in the latter, that is as a warrior, I have heard much, but I ask. Sorry, this isn't Smoit, this is Anlaw. Yeah, this is Anlaw. Smoit and his men are still moving north. In-law says, but have you forgotten your skill at my potter's wheel? Or have I wasted my own to teach you? Taryn, wasted? Yep. My skill lacks, but not my memory. What little I could learn, I have not forgotten. Show me then. Taryn's like, I'm a little busy. I got to raise this big old army because we got to go fight Satan. But okay, I'll sit down and make a pot for you. Taryn, can't. Halted only to give you greeting. Now I labor with swords, not earthen bowls. Nevertheless, he paused. He sits down. He feels the clay. Time pressed him too closely. Taryn knew. Yet as the work took form under his hands for a moment, he put down the burden of his other task. In other words, as he sits there, shoulders, arms tight, hands on the pile of clay, he just kind of starts to loosen up. As everything else, all the troubles, all the burdens, all the cares, starts to flow out of him through his fingers. The days turned back, and there was only the whirring of the wheel and the shape of the vessel, born from the shapeless clay. In-law, well done. I've heard how smiths and weavers throughout the comets labor to give you arms and raiment. I can't give you much from this wheel, and my clay is shaped only for peaceful tasks. I can offer nothing that will serve you now. Taryn, you've given me more than all the others. What? What's he given? I treasure it the most. My way is not the warrior's way. Taryn is saying, I am not a born warrior. That is not my purpose in life. Yet if I do not bear my sword now, there will be no place in Prydain for the usefulness and beauty of any craftsman's handiwork. He's saying, I only bury the sword because I have to. And if I fail, I will have lost all I gained from you. What has he gained? Okay, it's respect. What did he learn from in-law? Heaven told him life is like what?
The forge.
A forge. Where you hammer it into shape. Dweebek the Weaver Woman said life is like a loom. Where you have threads going different ways. Okay? And if you want your life to be beautiful, the threads have to be beautiful. Right choices, right decisions, and everything. In-law taught him life is like a potter's wheel. In other words, it's what you shape it. It's what you make out of it. And notice what is, when you sit at a potter's wheel, what are you turning into something else? Mud. Foul, dirty, rotten mud. Can become something beautiful. Can become something useful, but it doesn't have to be useful.
It's gaining perspective.
Yeah. He's gaining perspective on this thing called the journey of life. Okay? And his hand falters because he hears Call's name. Call's telling him, we've got riders that will soon be upon us. A little more than a skirmish, page 102. But sharply and hotly fought. Only at the last, when Call and Lester's hand drew off many of the foe, did the marauders break and flee. Yet it was the first battle Taryn had commanded as a war leader for the Prince of Dawn. The comet folk had carried the day, none of their number slain, only a few wounded. Okay. As he reached the hill crest, he saw flames and black billows of smoke as he turned back towards Comet Marin, which is where he just was before the skirmish began. And he rides, like the wind, to discover what? Comet burned. Too late, Call cried. The raiders circled and stormed the comet from the rear. Marin had been put to the torch. Taryn finds his way to Anlaw's hut, destroyed. Bottom of 102, top of 103. So it was with the hut of ENLG, which still smoldered, its ruins open to the sky. The body of the potter lay amid the rubble. Of the work of his hands, all had been shattered. The wheel was overturned, the bowl flung into pieces. Now remember what Terran had seen in ENLG's hut when he first arrived in Terran Wanderer. Shelves loaded with pottery. Now, everything destroyed. Terran drops to his knees. Call's hand was on his shoulder, but he drew himself away, stared up at the old warrior. Did I shout for victory? Small comfort to folk who once befriended me. Have I served them well? The blood of Marin is on my hands. What has Terran learned?
That you can't just focus on battle. You gotta
Okay.
focus on people you're trying to take care of.
Okay, what else?
Don't celebrate too early.
Don't celebrate too early. Sometime even with victories, you have losses. Did they win a victory? Yes, they did. But they also lost an awful lot. Okay? Because what was the victory really? The skirmish was fought where? Not at the comet. They were diverted. They followed a diversion. The riders of Anuvan drew them away so that when they moved away from the comet, they came in and destroyed it. Why? Why did they destroy the comet? Because they could. Does it serve a strategic advantage? Nope. What does it do? What does this do to Terran's mind?
Harms it.
Okay. Sometimes you attack targets to do what?
Weaken the enemy's resolve.
To weaken resolve, to break the will. Okay? Lasser speaks with Call. Page 103. The wanderer has not stirred from the potter's hut. Notice, the wanderer, and he now has a title. Okay? It is harsh enough for each man to bear his own wound, but he who leads bears the wounds of all who follow him. Okay, now notice that. He who leads bears the wounds of all who follow him. You listen to presidents, former presidents, every one of them will say, hardest decision they ever make is what? When they have to order troops into harm's way. Whatever the reason is. Because what do they know?
That people will die.
Somebody may, let's say of our side, some of our troops may die. It may be that they don't. Okay? But they're ordering people, possibly, to their deaths. Okay? And that's, can anyone, so to speak, absolve a president of that guilt? Nope. I mean, they can go to all the priests in the world and go to confession. They can go to all the preachers, all the pastors. They can talk to their wives, whatever. If you go to war under your watch, you're the one who sent however many of those troops who end up dying into battle. Call. Leave him alone. In the morning, he'll be well, though likely never healed. In other words, in the morning, he'll get back up, and what will Terran do?
We move on.
He'll strap that sword around his waist. He'll stiffen his spine, and he'll go on. He won't be the same. He won't be healed. Okay? By midwinter, we're told the last of the war bands had been gathered. In addition to a troop of horsemen, Lasser, Hev, and Lanio still remain with Terran, who now leads the companions westward through the Logadarn Mountains. There are raiders who keep trying to poke at them, but they gradually stop. Page 104. In his cloak, Terran bore one talisman, a shard of broken, fire-blackened pottery from Comet Marin. I don't know if you guys remember, most of you would have been pretty young then. After 9/11, George W. Bush delivered a speech to Congress on September 20th. of 2001. And he spoke in that speech, he held up a police badge. And some people think, oh, this is just theatricality. Okay? Others have said that what Bush said in that speech, he actually did for the next 7 years. That Bush said in that speech, I am going to keep this shield with me as a reminder of my duty to all those who died. And some of his aides and stuff have said, Bush, for the remaining 7 years of his presidency, he kept that shield in his pocket every day when he went to work. I mean, every day going down to the Oval Office, he kept that cop's shield. Okay? Why? It's a reminder. Taryn wants to be reminded. He doesn't want to forget in-law. Why? Because maybe when he starts to get a little, why am I fighting? What's the purpose? He looks at that broken, charred piece of pottery and says, this is why. Okay? Here's a, don't mean to be sexist or anything, and it's not actually. There's an account written by a Roman of the early German warriors around 100 AD. And the account is called Germania. It's written by a Roman author named Tacitus. And it's kind of interesting because it tells us some things about Germanic customs and practices. And Tacitus tells us that when Germans would get ready, when the German warriors would get ready to go off and fight a battle, if it was somewhat nearby their own home, their wives, daughters, sisters, mothers would go up on a hillside overlooking the battle and would expose themselves and essentially say to the men, boys, this is what you're fighting for. Because what does that say? You don't protect us, we become slaves to the other side. Okay? It's a reminder. It's a thing to spur them on. So, Taryn meets up with Fluter and such and his army. And we hear, and we're going to stop with this, I think. But at the end of page 105. Yeah, we can finish it there. Cheered by the bard's music, the companions journeyed on together. Soon the high fortress of Cardathel rose golden in the winter sunlight. Its mighty bastions sprang up like eagles, impatient for the sky. Notice the description here. This is Math's fortress. The battlements rise like eagles. In other words, it's not like standing outside Peck Hall. God forbid. Okay? It would be like 5 Peck Halls on top of each other in terms of how big this thing is. Beyond the walls encircling the fortress stood the camps and flag-decked pavilions of lords come in allegiance to the royal house of Dawn. Yet it was not the sight of the banners or the wind-tossed emblems of the golden sunburst that made Taryn's heart leap, but rather the knowledge that the companions and combat warriors had come safe to the end of one journey. Notice, not the journey, to warmth and rest for a little time at least. Safe, Taryn thinks. And then he remembers. The companions aren't all safe, are they? The memories returned of Rune, king of Mona, who slept silent before the gates of Kadarn, of Anlaw, clay shaper, and his fingers clenched around the fragment of pottery. This is why. Okay? He's doing it for Rune. He's doing it for Anlaw. Okay, we'll stop there and pick up. So expect a quiz over all of the High King on Thursday.